Okay. Do you want to start here in like a couple seconds?
When you're ready, I'm ready.
All right. Good. We're back for another episode of Case by Case with Kou Hello. And the box.
Hello.
And today we're covering a case of Invi. So, in the last episode we covered Case of Era, and we are now moving on to Invi, who, as our narrator Charity tells us, was supposed to be the mediator of the group. Quoted from the movie, similarly, the virtuous Invi, who wore the mask of the snake, was given her role to watch over the others with a fair eye. Invi is the leader of the union called Anguis. The word Anguis itself is Latin, meaning snake, serpent, or dragon. Did you have anything on that, the box?
Yeah, just a little thing. Of course, I'm biased because Invi is my foreteller. I am an Anguis member, so just for you guys to set the mood about what I'm going to say. And also, when it comes to the name of the union, it is a little bit weird compared to all the others, since the Latin word that they decided to use for the union is probably an even more archaic and less common word for snake compared to the one that I, as an Italian, would be more familiar with, and the one that you will get immediately if you put snake into a English to Latin translator. The word that you will get is usually serpents, which is just basically like the English word and the Italian word, while anguis is a word that in modern Italian it doesn't exist anymore. It may still exist as a scientific name, for the genus, the family snakes are part of, but I'm not sure. But it is not a word that you use daily to describe a snake.
Gotcha. And to be fair, if we just used union serpentis, that would be. It doesn't sound fantastical enough, I guess, because we use serpent a lot anyway.
Yeah, but so is leopardus in a sense.
Yeah,
so,
I suppose
unicorn is. So
yeah.
It's just that it's probably the more exotic of all the names.
Yeah. If you were to look up Anguis, probably one of the first things you'll come up on is the Latin name for a small genus of legless lizards, often mistaken for snakes. And of course, I like to think, this is my headcanon, that Invi, even though her mask is the snake, well, the genus name is Anguis, but a particular type of legless lizard is Anguis fragilis, because they, like other lizards, can drop their tail if need be. So this particular critter looks like a snake and it looks dangerous, but it's actually just, a cutie who doesn't want to be bothered. So it takes on a defensive stance to look like a snake. At least that's what I think. I'm going to headcanon that. She's just a cutie doing her best to be strong and be unharassed.
That's kind of cute. And
I think that's really
you said
cute.
it's fragilis, like fragile. That's really fitting. That's really fitting.
We'll go into that later when we go over her scene with the mom. I think we also wanted to take a look at her keyblade because we went over it with Ira, but aside from this keyblade being the coolest looking of the keyblades, I can't really discern anything there. Except for maybe the incidental symbol for eternity that the cobra on her keyblade makes. That's the only thing I can think of that might be...
Yeah, the horizontal 8 kind of shape. Which, again, when it comes to the symbolism of the snake, it is usually, the Ouroboros, the snake that eats its tail, is kind of used often as a symbol for eternity and life and death and the circle of life.
Oh,
so
that is.
That can actually be something that they had in mind. I mean, the normal, form, of the snake kind of lends itself, to forming these circling shapes, of course, and that's why, in across history, it was associated with that.
Oh, okay.
And another thing that I think is interesting to point out is that her keyblade looks a little bit And I'm not going to say that it is an intentional similarity, that they did this on purpose and it means something. But when I look at it, it reminds me a little bit of Nightmare's Hand.
Oh, right.
Which is, the combined keyblade that Sora and Riku can use in DDD and also in Kingdom Hearts 3 for some reason, despite them not being in the Sleeping World.
Right.
Technically, we don't know.
I'm sure it will or will not be explained later on if it's important.
Yeah, probably. And the reason why I say this is because, like, the guard of the Keyblade is not completely closed. Like, the shape that he makes is more like a C than, I don't know, rectangle.
Yeah.
And usually, like, Keyblades have the full guard. At least most of them used to add it in the past, probably because they were trying, design-wise, they were trying to stay closer to the idea of an actual key.
That makes a lot of sense to me.
How it would look like. While right now they are just doing these really fantastical and weird shapes that sometimes they look more like swords than actual keys.
Yeah. We can also mention that the Keyblade charm, I think that's what it's called, has a very familiar shape there, and we might bring that back up later on in the story. Just keep that in the back of your mind.
Let's just leave it at that.
Yeah.
The other observation I would like to make about Invi's design, since you mentioned, the cute legless lizard. The snakeless lizard.
They are snakeless.
I just created a new creature. So the legless lizard is that Invi's mask is different from that of all the other foretellers, since it is not just the head, but it is the body of the snake. It's like a mask with the snake wrapped around it, and so it looks like Invi has kind of a braid because of the tail of the snake. It gives her this different design and
a very exotic look compared to the others, I would say.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the reasons why they may have decided to do this, of course, I don't know what Tetsuya Nomura was thinking, but in my head, it kind of feels like maybe giving her, the upper jaw of a snake,
right?
And we know with the eyes and everything, as her mask would have maybe looked a little bit too frightening, since snakes have these really long fangs.
Yeah.
And they actually open their mouths properly. And she's not a character that is supposed to be that intimidating.
Yes.
I mean, she tries her best, and she can actually hold her ground when it's necessary. But overall, she's portrayed as a sweet character.
Yeah, and it would be really hard to, like, in a story where we already have a problem trying to pick who we think is the traitor in the story, like, having her with the snake head would just be, I think, too strong of, like, a clue. Or not a clue, but, like, it would be too misleading, I think. Yeah?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
I think, like, people were saying, even before, like, back cover came out, since in the promotional material they were, pushing this idea, who's the traitor.
Oh, really?
Like, people were saying, of course, he's the snake girl.
Oh, no!
because usually the snake, especially in our Western culture, is usually associated with evil.
Right.
Because, of Christianity.
Yeah.
And it is the, basically the first, betrayal and slash, what's the word I'm looking for? Deceit.
Yeah. That's right.
The first, was, Satan in the form of a snake tempting Eve. So in our imaginary, in our, common perception, like, snakes are usually, and even, just from experience, like, people are usually, they tend to fear reptiles and snakes in general, even if most of them are actually harmless. Even those that you can encounter in the wild, especially like in Europe, it's not that you will find like super venomous snakes like you can in other countries, But in general, we tend, to avoid that sort of animal,
Right.
compared to a cute puppy or something
Yes,
like that.
yes. We have better relations with other animals than the snake. All right. That's a good point. Speaking of snakes in mythology, I think you also brought up that you had. Did you have something from snakes being represented in Eastern mythology?
Yeah. I actually found out this quite recently, like a couple of days ago, while I was researching this, and it kind of ties back with the fact that Invi's mask is not, just the head of the snake, but it is a snake wrapped around their head.
Yeah.
Because let me scroll through my notes. So if you can hear like the pages.
Yes,
clicking,
it
that's what
sounds
I
very
do.
scholarly.
Okay. There is in Japanese folklore, there is a water goddess of fertility that is named, and I'm going to butcher this,
Oh,
Benzaiten.
I'm gonna look it up. Continue.
Okay, which is often depicted with a white snake as her tiara/crown. And she's associated with water, thunder, and lightning. And she's part of a group of 7 gods that are known as the Shiki Fukujin.
Oh, yeah?
Again, probably destroying
you
the
got it.
pronunciation. Okay, good.
Nailed it.
And the interesting thing about these 7 gods, like, they are not particularly powerful gods, so it's not like they are, something to be feared. It's more like, I think that it would be more comparable to something like in a family spirit that you will pray to, like in an altar in your own home. Like most of them don't have shrines in Shinto, as far as I understand. It's something more like some kind of familiar cult.
Yeah, I think it's maybe similar to how some Western traditions would usually pray to a saint rather than
Yeah, exactly. Or
the
even
All
like
Creator.
a guardian angel.
Yeah. Okay, and yeah, I think you got her name right too. Benzaiten.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. And the cute thing that I found out was that these 7 gods are actually, each of them is associated with a virtue,
Oh, well.
which again kept reminding me of, the fact that the foretellers are associated with one of the deadly sins.
Yeah.
And there was that, long discussion when the cover came out, and people still discuss this to this day, that, actually the foretellers are displaying the virtue instead of the sin.
You think so?
Aced is acedia per la precisione. That's how you should pronounce it. Sorry for the
No, it's
little
all right.
Italian that escaped me. Which is basically laziness.
Uh-huh.
But he's actually the more active of all the characters, probably.
So it's kind of like a reverse
Yeah. So
of what's on the cover.
Yeah, like you say that he's lazy, but actually he's very active, proactive in a positive way, kinda. And all the others can be interpreted this way, except maybe the master, but we don't really know.
Yeah, I don't think we'll know for a bit now.
Yeah. And so I found it curious that these 7 gods are related, to virtues. But the virtues that they list on the various websites that I, looked up, they aren't what we would consider virtues. It's more like positive things.
Right.
I mean, it's not charity. It's not...
Oh, right.
It's things like, joy, honesty, wisdom. I mean, maybe some of them you can say that they are virtues, but like happiness, I wouldn't say that it is a virtue. You know?
It's not a one-to-one that's going to counteract the sins we have in her from the
Exactly.
7 deadly sins. Yeah, I see that.
But I still think it was interesting, and I also when I read the name of the goddess, I like something clicked in my head. I was like, I heard this before, and then I realized that it is one of the demons in Shin Megami Tensei.
Oh, okay.
And Persona 2. So it's one of the really, how can I say, classic ones that they always bring back. So I don't know exactly in which game she was introduced, but probably like or the first Persona, or even just one of the old Shin Megami Tenseis, like maybe Nocturne. or something like that. But again,
Gotcha. She has a long history in
video
the
game.
bestiary of the video game. Kind of like Bahamut always shows up in Final Fantasy.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, it's not completely obscure goddess or entity
Right.
or spirit, whatever you want to define her as.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's basically all I have about the snake.
All right, all right. Well, then let's move on. We first learn about Invi by the narrator, but we actually meet her during. Unlike Ira, she doesn't have the opening scene. Ira is our exposition character and our introduction to the world. Invi is introduced during the meeting regarding the Dark Charity, and as her role entails, she does her best to be the voice of reason when everybody is pointing fingers at each other. She brings her reasoning instead of shouting like some people do, like some person does.
We're not going to, mention names, but
No, we'll save him for later. But I do like. There's an interesting bit because of course they debate the whole thing about the Dark Charity, but I think it's really interesting that at the end of the meeting, Gula, who I mentioned before in the last episode, was kind of like a know-it-all, kind of snobby kid. He, throughout the whole meeting, he's sitting with his back towards the gathering, and when he leaves, he doesn't turn to acknowledge his leader. He kind of looks over his shoulder at Invi and tells her, "I trust you'll keep us all updated." And I kind of really want to slap him right there. I think he's mocking her because unlike through the whole movie, there's this everybody has a role, but there is kind of like an unsaid point of the story to where none of them have explained the roles to anybody else, except with the one exception is Invi, who
yeah, it looks like it.
yeah, I mean, it looks like everybody knows what her role is supposed to entail. At least Ased explains, like, yeah, you're supposed to observe, but not to report everything to Ira. And that's kind of one of the things we're immediately introduced to regarding her interactions with other characters. When the meeting is over, she stays back to talk to Ira about what transpired.
And nobody seems to question it. Like, it's
Yeah.
normal
Yeah.
that, she does this. To me, like, it feels almost like Invi has been doing this since forever.
Yeah.
Like, she was always the one that they were using, like, maybe when something happened, instead of actually, solving the problem with the person that they were having, like, the troubles with, they always went, to Invi and tried to use her as a mediator. Kind of feels like that. It's the big sister trope.
Yeah,
in a sense.
she's their HR.
The responsible one.
Aw. I really love that she is kind of like the big sister. Like, she's part of the group, yes, but then there's that weird, like, trade-off where you trust her, but you don't want to tell her everything unless it's a problem, because she's going to tattle it to somebody. That's kind of the feeling I get.
But what you were saying, it makes you think the fact that Ased knows what Invi has to do, but, like, Invi doesn't know what Ava has to do.
Right.
She doesn't know what Ased has to do.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
it's like we are missing a scene.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we haven't seen, which is like a recurrent thing in back cover and Key in general. Like, it looks like you are missing stuff, and then they actually fill in during, when with the updates of the game.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that they will ever fill this one.
No. And I'm not gonna lie, I had to watch this movie like several times before I could wrap my head around what was going on.
It's really confusing.
Yeah, but once you
for
kind
a
of get
story that it's so simple, it's just told in a really confusing way.
I don't know if it's confusing so much as it's
Convoluted.
intentionally convoluted, so that the whole story isn't immediately obvious to you, and you kind of have to go back and kind of logically think about how each character interacts with each other. That's the feeling I get when I watch
Oh
it
yeah, definitely.
because it makes
For
sense to me
example,
now.
go on, go on.
Oh, I was just gonna say it makes sense to me now, but I was very lost the first time I saw it, and it didn't really strike me as anything important until I started looking at the characters and why, trying to think out why each one of them acts the way they do, and then it became infinitely more interesting.
Yeah, definitely. And this is something that I actually noticed while I was rewatching the movie again for this episode.
Always good to hear.
And yeah, and it is that when I was watching the scene, I thought I was wrong about what I said about Ased in the last episode, but actually I was right.
Which one?
I'm going to get to the point. Just give me a second.
Sure.
The reason why I wasn't sure is because Ased says two different things in two different scenes, so he kind of contradicts himself. What I said in the last episode was that Ased, was angry with Ira because he accused one of them of being the traitor, and he wanted the alliance with Gula because he, despite not being cool with what Ira said, he still wanted this alliance with Gula and the others because he thought there was actually a traitor. Mm-hmm. And in the first scene between Ased, Gula, and the others, the one in the room with the boxes, he says that the reason why he wants the alliance is not because he thinks that there is a traitor, but because he says there is this darkness coming. I don't think that there is a traitor, but since dark things are coming, we should probably band together,
okay.
just in case. But later on, in another scene with Gula, he says, we don't know who's the traitor yet.
Right.
So I'm I said, because I remembered the second, that line when he actually, scolds Gula and he's that one stuck with me, while the other was more like a nebulous memory. And so at first I thought I was wrong, but then he actually thinks that there is a traitor. So I'm
yeah.
And this is what you were saying, that the writing is a bit confusing.
Yeah.
Mostly because there are time jumps, so you have to assume that the characters may even change what they used to, change their mind. So maybe Ased didn't think that there was a traitor, but now he does.
Yeah.
But since the cutscenes are so close together in the span of 1 hour, you are what the hell?
What the hell happened? Yeah, and it's interesting to think that sometimes it's just a couple days jump, but sometimes it's a month or two jump. And later on we learned that at least a year has passed since the very beginning of the movie and the very end of the movie. But that sort of time span, it goes by in a flash, a lot of times in real life. And you think back to something you did 2 months ago and it's ancient history.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, but it could also. I also think that Ased wanting to join forces in order to defeat the darkness, and him not believing there's a traitor. I think he specifically mentions that there isn't a traitor amongst us, the foretellers.
Yeah, he does.
So he's probably conflating the traitor with darkness. In the whole battle between light and dark, this traitor is a member or agent of darkness, and so he wants to counter that, and that's one way we can square it.
And he also sounds like he's kinda I want to say butthurt, but it's not the word I'm looking for.
Yeah, I get
it's
you.
More
got a chip on his shoulder.
Yeah, he feels betrayed that Ira would accuse one of them.
Yeah.
He's I thought we were comrades.
Yeah.
He says this to Gula, and I promise that we'll get back to Invi soon. But she steps in during this conversation, so I think it's also important, to kind of set up what was going on in the room with the boxes. And Gula's I said, we aren't comrades, we are colleagues. So Ira is kind of right in questioning us. Yeah, that's what I wanted to say. Basically, that Assad really has this feeling, or at least he feels like they are all like this unit, this like group, while Gula is more like maybe realist in the way he approaches this, and he's like, there could be like a traitor among us. I don't really think that our bonds are so strong as you may think.
Well, let's take a step back here. After let's step a little bit further back, in fact, towards the end of the meeting. Because when Ira is voicing his concerns about the missing page, Invi brings up the point, if the master knew a lot of this stuff that was coming up, maybe the fact that there is somebody with the missing information is part of the plan. And that's foreshadowing, I think, for the whole story, because the whole story is all about them trying to figure out who the traitor is. And yeah, it might, like, you might forget this sentence, like, early on in the story, but maybe it is part of the plan, and they're walking into it blind, so they can't see the bigger picture.
Yeah, and there is also the fact that near the end, Ira actually says, maybe Gula is just following his role, once he finds out that Gula is the one with the page. But at the same time, we already discussed the Ira at length in the last episode. And, but, the gist of it is that maybe Ira doesn't really think that. He says it to Assad, maybe Gula is doing good, but he's probably still very suspicious. Yeah.
Yeah, he's just trying to be a diplomat at that point. I'd also like to bring up and here's something I want your opinion on. Invi, before she leaves, she mentions to Ira, "I will keep you informed. After all, that is what the master asked of me." Now, that's what she says. But in the next scene with the Master of Masters, we are given more information about what her role actually is. So the mom tells her, you need to observe the others. Invi needs to observe the others. Don't be shy, but be fair, and do not be afraid to speak up. And even though he says to observe the others, specifically, she has to be the mediator and make sure everyone gets along. Do you think Invi misconstrued what he said, or is she purposefully telling Ira that her job is to watch the others and report to him?
Yeah, I think it's like a mixture of both. Because there is one thing that I've not mentioned yet, but the reason why the master says to her, "Don't be shy, be fair," blah blah blah, is like some kind of encouragement, because it seems like Invi is shy, is someone that doesn't really have like these qualities, like or at least that's how she thinks. Like she doesn't think she's fit for the job. Yeah, but the master insists and says, like, if you don't do if you don't, step up to the challenge, in a sense, you are going to be left alone.
Yeah.
And, this was actually, for me, one of the cutest moments, in a sense, because during this case, like, she's the only one that we kind of get, like, her weakness, like her fear.
Yeah.
It's kind of, the master kind of spells out what she fears would happen.
Yeah.
And if this is what she thinks, which, of course, we can't really say if it is or not. But, we can assume that the master knows her well.
Yes.
Probably, her, the fact that she attaches herself to Ira is like her way of not being left behind.
Yeah. I think that's really, really cute and sad.
Yeah, it's cute. But so it kind of feels like she does misunderstand,
or
what the master was asking her, but they kind of all do this in a way or another. Because again, make sure everyone gets along, and she's
Right.
the one that actually gets into fights
Right.
with Ased. I mean,
Straight
Ira
away with
kind of
Ased.
does the same. Kind of does the same. I mean, Ira was supposed to keep the others calm. So, but
Uh,
yeah, like there is also the fact that sometimes this happens in Ava's case too.
oh yeah.
Like Dee and Lucius, in a sense, but we found out later about him, is that the case is not completed. Like the scene is not over when it actually ends in back cover. For example, like Ava's case is much longer, and we see the other part of her conversation with the Master of Masters in the game, in the mobile game. So again, here could also be like this thing, like maybe there was like some extra lines between her and the Master, or something that even happened before and we are not aware of. Or maybe she and Ira are just very close, and so she trusts him like beyond anything. Or maybe it's just like a fact that she's very dependent on the idea of authority.
Yeah.
And this is something that to me makes the most sense, because she's also the only character beside the Master that ever mentions Luciu.
That's true.
And we don't really know in the hierarchy, what position does Luciu cover.
Yeah.
But the way that Invi says it, she's like, without you, the mom, and Luciu, what the fuck are we going to do? That's basically what she says. And Ira is the one that is appointed to be leader by the Master. So if you remove the Master and you remove Luciu,
yeah, and
Ira is the one that she has to look up to now.
That's true.
And so again, that's probably my answer. Like she thinks that Ira is trustworthy, despite
having
some evidence. Yeah, despite having made a kind of big mess during their gathering.
Yeah. And to be fair, all of the foretellers have this problem with authority where they absolutely trust the Master to a high degree. And then
Invi more
when
than
he's
all the others.
Well, especially it's mentioned in her her character bio. She holds the Master of Masters in the highest esteem, and so it's one of her defining features. So with the mom gone, like logically the next person that she should be relying on, or at least trying to back up, is Ira. I was going to say something else about this. Oh yeah, all of the foretellers. Huh? Oh, go for it.
I have some notes about this because again, the reason why Invi is my favorite foreteller is because she's a mom fangirl, basically.
Oh, right. Good point.
And so I have more points about this, more notes. And one is that Invi is the first character. Let me see. Yes. Invi is the first character in the movie that actually says, "May your heart be your guiding key," even before we hear it from the Master. I mean, chronologically speaking, of course, he's the one that said it before. To her and to the others. Yeah. But in the movie, she's the first person that speaks it aloud, and she says it to Ira in a way in which, to me sounds like, this is what the Master said before he left. So that's probably what you should do too, now that you are the leader.
Gotcha.
And there is also another cute thing, because Invi is really, really cute, that we didn't touch upon while we were discussing her appearance, or at least, her design, in a sense. It is that Invi is the more covered up of all the foretellers.
Yeah.
I mean, they are kind of, all...
masked.
you can basically see just, their nose and chin. But when it comes to Invi, sometimes you can't even see her mouth, because she has like this white scarf mouth covering thing around her
face. Yeah. In fact, she's the most obscured visually of all the foretellers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the exception is that she wears the scarf or mouth covering or whatever you want to call it throughout all the movie, including when she's fighting a set and she's like panting, so
Right.
it's a very, an action sequence, but she still wears the scarf except when she's talking to the Master of Masters.
Yeah.
So this feels like, a moment of vulnerability in which like she opens up completely and she's actually saying, I'm worried, like you Luciu left, you are going to leave.
Right.
Ira, I don't know if we can do this,
Oh, no.
and I
Right.
don't know if I trust the others. So, and the master, of course, he pats her on the head and he's very charming and cute with her.
Yeah.
In a super manipulative way, but still.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe. I mean, if you look at all of the foretellers, you can tell they all have this they're very disarmed when they're around the mom. They like trust him to a very high degree, even if they don't feel confident in the roles that he sets forth for them. But they definitely trust him a lot, and so his disappearance is a very what is it, disconcerting event for them. Like you figure a leader or a teacher would expect the pupil to have the confidence and the experience in order to carry on the teachings. But like we said in the last episode, all of them seem like kids, like little lost kids when the mom goes.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, it's an interesting
I
thought.
mean, we can say that it is because they are actually young. Despite I mean, Ira and Ased look older, and Invi could be like the same age of them, maybe. Design wise, like girls, usually look younger, especially when designed, in anime, manga style. But I mean, she could be the same age as Ira.
Right, whatever that happens to be. But I
Yeah,
do
whatever that happens to be.
I do feel like they're past their teens, if anything.
Yeah, probably.
At least those three.
I mean, we also know now from Union Cross that the Master is definitely older than them because
Yeah.
of the whole,
The whole scene
when I
with
was a
Luciu.
kid.
Right, and Luciu just can't believe
And
that.
it's like, what?
We're a kid once?
So, like, he's supposed to be older than them, or at least older than Luciu, which is probably around the same age as Gula, I would say. Maybe a bit older, a little bit. I don't know. I mean, you can really
Kind of hard
tell
to
with
place,
Luciu.
actually, because we don't see Luciu with any of the other foretellers except in Union
it's
Cross.
true.
And all of them are chibi at that point, so...
Yeah, but I mean, he is definitely shorter than the Master. So,
Oh,
I don't know.
I noticed in my notes, there was a post on Tumblr by Will of Fortune Dash Design that goes over. They kind of recontextualize the seven deadly sins
Oh, okay.
from the source. So if we look at Envy, 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 not the character. It's not a sin if you want things that you see other people have, like money, power, or fame. But it is a sin when this want you have is how you define people and you stop respecting them as humans. So,
Oh, makes sense.
yeah, so it's a sin when you use people for what they have and what they can bring you. And if we want to be absolutely like savage on against Envy's character, it is possible that she has what is it called? In her brain she has reasoned that her role is to be the mediator, but it would also be beneficial if she were indispensable to the new leader, because the new leader needs help, right? So she could be using Ira through a convoluted manner to, one, not be left behind and be part of the group, but
This kind of a way to elevate herself. in
right,
a
or
sense.
at least ensure that she doesn't get left out of her group. I can totally see that as like one of her what is it called? Not a defining
Flaws?
characteristic, but yeah, one of her flaws. It's not a terrible flaw because she's not malicious in what she does, but she's a little misguided. And I think that's something we can say for all of the foretellers. They're all a little misguided.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's also it's also realistic. Like, I feel like it's something that someone would do in that
Yes.
situation.
Yeah.
Especially if she actually has these insecurities that, the master kind of places on her in the case. So,
Yeah. And just to be honest, like when I see each of the foretellers' relationship with the Master of Masters, I actually um I actually look at the insecurities that he has placed, like he's basically amplified the insecurities of these characters so that they act a certain way later on in the story. And so in
oh
this
yeah,
case,
definitely.
Envy has a fear maybe of being an outcast or left behind or not picked for the team. So she has latched onto Ira as like her last ditch effort to stay with the group.
Yeah, it also kind of implies that like she's afraid of change, which is again something that the master points out. I have
Yeah.
like a quote, which is like, "Change can be hard, but things need to move forward."
Yep.
And this is interesting in context, in my opinion, because like he already gave them the books, so like they know, they
Right.
know what's coming next and what is going to happen once things move forward.
I mean, yeah.
And
Provided they read the
so
book, yeah.
yeah, and he also says to Hira that they should not worry right now, but that things need to move so they can go, and actually do whatever they are supposed to do once the Keyblade War is done, once everything is come to pass. And
true.
this is kind of, I mean, he doesn't, of course, he doesn't repeat the same things to Invi, but he's like, yeah, change happens.
Yeah. Yep. Even though I gave you a book that tells you everything that's going to happen, change will happen. Doesn't seem suspicious. The next time we run into Envy, it's during Ased's secret meeting with his fellow foretellers, Sans Era. And as we mentioned earlier, he wants to form an alliance because even though he doesn't believe there is a traitor amongst the foretellers,
At
there's
least
still,
not at that point.
yeah, there's still possibly a traitor, maybe from one of their unions, because the charity they saw at the meeting was not obviously, well, not obvious to anyone who it could be, but he has a feeling he just has a gut feeling it's not one of them, and he has even though Envy is okay, so here's a weird thing. Ased could not invite Ira to the meeting because he just had a fight with him. And he's convinced that Ira is going to spend all of his time looking through the book to find the traitor or find evidence of what the traitor's up to. And he has invited Envy to the meeting just to see if she'll join their alliance. And this is interesting to me because Envy immediately gives him a scolding for creating alliances because the Master of Masters specifically forbade the creation of alliances because doing so would offset the balance during the competition for Lux, as I understand it.
Yeah, that's how it seems.
So she immediately shouts at him for that. And Ased,
and not just that, I would say, like, she immediately says, if we kind of disrupt the balance, one of the unions, or the unions that join this alliance can get greedy, and that that greed for Lux is what can turn people.
yeah, it's the
to
darkness
darkness.
in people's hearts. And she tells Ased this.
She also accuses Ased of being the one that has been tainted by darkness.
Oh, jeez, that's right.
Straightforward, immediately. And he's like, "No, I am a nice bear man."
Yeah,
And,
how dare.
but
Excuse me.
what I thought was cute is that like she immediately like seems to regret saying it.
Well,
Because
yeah.
while Asad is there, accusing the blow, she's like she puts like her hand on her chest, she's like, oh shit, I didn't mean to say that, but Asad, of course, is already really angry.
Well, yes. Very, very.
Go on, go on.
Always. I think that's kind of like his default state. It's probably because he gets surprised a lot. Because, I love Ased, but sometimes he seems a little slow. So he gets surprised a lot, and the first thing he does is he absolutely just reacts to it, rather than having thought this through. But yeah, so when she does that, Ased immediately reminds her, look, you're not guiltless in being better than or immune to the darkness, because your role is supposed to observe, but you basically are spying for Ira. And that's not what the master told you. So, like, for some reason, even though a lot of them don't know what each other's roles are, like Invi
Asad
somehow.
knows.
Yeah.
And
Somehow.
that's what we were saying before. And another thing that I noted here is that Invi really doesn't know how to defend herself from this accusation. She's like, I mean, he's right. So she said, like, that's enough, something like
Yeah,
that. She can't articulate, some excuse for herself, because it's true. Like, the master never told her,
Right.
to spy for Ira.
I do love that bit too.
Again, I just love the fact that Ased is always right.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
He's just too angry about everything, and nobody wants to
Nobody
listen to him.
trusts him. Like, nobody wants to listen to him, but he's always right.
But anyway, so that takes us to the next bit. Most
In my
of
notes,
Huh?
I have like the next scene is the one between Ava and Ephemer, but we are going
Yeah.
to skip it, of course.
Yeah, that's
And,
Envious.
yes, and the next one with Invi and Ira is when she reports to him.
Or we presume she reports, because we don't actually see. What actually happens is Ased and Envy are fighting in the well, not in the streets, may as well be, but they're like fighting across the rooftops because
No, wait, there is another scene before.
Oh, which one?
Before that one. There is the scene in which, the one I was talking about, in which...
Oh God, I'm
she
sorry,
reports
you're
it.
right.
Yeah, no, it's fine. And I think that's cute because, like, she tells Ira about what happened, the fact that they are trying to form these alliances. And Ira immediately goes, so, okay, Ased is the traitor then. Like, I was right, you see? And Invi's like, no, I don't think he's. Like, I think, he thinks he's doing good in a stupid way, but I think he's doing good. Which, again,
trying.
in this situation, like, Invi is actually doing her role properly. Like, she's being fair, but she's reporting to Ira that she's not technically supposed to be doing that. So.
It's true.
She's both doing good and fucking it up at the same time.
That's really human of them. That's very good. I enjoy it. So that being the case, she also tries to be the mediator in a good way because Ira stands up and he says, "Okay, well, I'm going to confront Ased about this. You can't have alliances. It's forbidden, blah blah blah." But she knows immediately that Ira cannot go and talk Ased out of it. It'll probably just piss him off. So instead,
So she's like, I'm going to discuss this with Gula.
Actually, you know what? That reminds me. It's in my notes here, but it also just I was reminded that she can't talk to Ased either because of the fight she had with him.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so that's why she's talking to Gula instead. She reacted a little too strongly herself about the whole alliances thing, so the only person she can talk to now is Gula. But yeah, so I mean that's
like
decent.
maybe if they all argued with each other, they would just stop talking with each other, and
That's true.
this probably could have been avoided. I don't know. This whole thing. I don't know.
That's
Probably
possible.
not. Probably not. But
then we wouldn't have a story.
yeah, at the end of the scene with Ira, she also says that from this moment onwards, she's not going to report to him anymore, because of course, Ased is basically right. So I shouldn't technically be doing this, and like the others are growing suspicious suspicious. And
Suspicious.
it kind of looks like you and I, Invi and Ira, are in an alliance of their own, in a
Right.
sense. So, we can't talk the others into not making alliances when we are actually having an alliances between the two of us.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, which again, these parts make a lot of sense and kind of prove that like she's a really reasonable and fair character.
Yeah.
So again, Invi's best foreteller.
Best
besides
foreteller.
Ascend.
Best girl.
Okay, now we can move to the fight scene, and
Yeah.
that's all. You go.
The fight scene is so. Let me just. I love this fight scene. I'm sad there aren't more fight scenes, but I understand. It's a 3D movie. Probably can't spend all the time fighting. So Ased goes after Invi, because she quote end quotes convinced Gula to end the alliance, even though he says he chose to do it himself. He's using her as an excuse, of course. So the next thing Ased does is he goes to fight Invi over it. And we can kind of see Invi rightfully points out that Ased is being very self-centered in this whole incident, because like everyone is working against him. The darkness obviously is stopping him from finding out who it is, but she reminds him that he's not exactly the hero in this case. She's trying to help them keep the balance, and he needs to get his head out of his ass, basically, and realize that he's going about things the wrong way.
Yeah, she's like, calm down.
Yeah,
Basically.
bro, chill out. And he actually doesn't have anything against to say against that either. Like he got caught. But yeah, so in this particular scene, when she's shouting that she's there to protect the balance of that the five of them were expected to keep, of course we get this cool little visual representation, yeah, of the fracturing of the five of them, because like there's a flower and the petals are splitting off in 5 different directions.
Yeah, which is a nice visual touch.
Yeah, if you didn't think that was what's happening, it's totally happening. Nobody is helping anybody bring things back together. They're all kind of caught up in their own insecurities and their own actions to realize what they're doing to the group.
Yeah, this is kind of the breaking point for everything else that comes later. And I also find it interesting that the 2 moments in which they, the group and then everything goes to shit,
Yeah.
is when, you have 2 of them fighting, like 2 of the 7 fighting. Is the first one in, you have, fighting not just by talking, but actual fighting with the keyblades and everything. The first
Trading
moment
blows.
is this one. Yeah, is this one in which these 2 adults, let's call them like that, even if they are not adults, but characters that are in a position of power and they are supposed to be masters, teachers,
Right.
are fighting each other over their own misunderstandings, or at least the way they interpret what's going on is different. Because Ased has his own ideas, Invi has his own her own ideas, and they can't find an agreement or an in between, or just sitting down again and talking.
Yeah.
And the second moment in which this happens is later on when Ava and Luciu fight.
The game Union Cross.
In Union Cross, yeah, of course, not in back cover. Even if it would have been awesome to see that scene, which is probably the best scene in the entire Union Cross key thing, but we will never see it.
So that'd be so cool, though. Yeah. I also want to point out the part where Invi, of course, holds the mom in very high regard, and she is absolutely just shocked that Ased would want to defy what the master taught them, his teachings, in order to preserve the light. And, while Ased reasons with her that, the master isn't here, we need to figure this out on our own terms, even though he says the master is not there, there is a very, very blatant, close up of the eye charm uh
on
overseeing this
his
whole
keyblade.
event. Yeah, I find that just, and we didn't mention it in the case of Era because this part is more of an Invi Ased scene rather than an Era scene. But
Yeah, definitely.
all of the foretellers have that eye as their Keyblade charm. So, he's been watching whether they know it or not
And
the
it
whole
is not
time.
clear at this point if the other eyes that we see on the other Keyblades in the entire series are actually the Master's Eye. We don't
Yeah,
know.
it's hard to
But
tell.
at least it is from a symbolic standpoint. Even if he's not watching like Lucio is at this stage. Like he's somewhere hidden on the rooftops watching this thing going on. And he
Yep.
has no name in this
Right.
moment. So even if, it's not, the master is not seeing what's going on through their keyblades, he's surely seeing this through Lucius. And honestly, like this exchange between Ased and Invi is like one of my favorite parts in the movie.
Oh yeah.
Because they both seem so distraught and desperate in this moment for different reasons. Like Ased is like I feel like he's more frustrated than anything else. He's like
Yeah.
I am surrounded by idiots in this moment. That's how I feel like Ased is, saying to himself, like,
Yeah.
I am the only one that can fix this. And
Yeah.
the master kinda asked me to do it, and
Right.
we will get to this once we get to Ased. But let's just say that Ased was tasked to take over for Ira if Ira wasn't doing good. That's all I'm going to say. And Ased says, like, the literal, like, the quote is, "We need to defy the master's teachings to protect the world." And while he's saying this, again, it's probably just because they are fighting, and so he's probably sweating. But the way in which you can see, like, this drop of sweat on his cheek, which is basically the only part of the face that is visible,
Right.
almost like looks like a tear,
Oh.
like a teardrop.
Aw. Yeah.
Because it's not
We can't
far
tell.
away from where the eyes would be.
Right.
So
Right.
and I always thought, was cute, and also kind of points out that he's more tired physically than Invi is, or at least Invi doesn't seem to be that. She doesn't seem that she's accusing the fight as much as Ased is. And
Oh yeah,
at
she's
this,
definitely not as winded as he is.
yeah, and at this point, like, it's just the two of them. So it's like the others haven't joined in yet. So it looks like Invi's winning.
Yeah.
At this point, at least from the way in which they look, like, he looks more tired than her. That's
Yeah.
what I
Also,
feel.
like, in the fight, she was nullifying all of his like slash attacks. Like, like anytime he tried to use like a forward slash, like I guess her magic nullifies it, and she's able to go right through it. And that's funny because that kind of adheres to the meta in the mobile game.
Oh yeah, that's cool.
yeah,
Talk about that, please. That's cool.
Yeah. The mobile game has a rock paper scissor like mechanic where there are 3 attributes: power, speed, and magic, and each one has a strength against the other, and each one has like a weakness against the other. So in this case, magic overpowers power, power overpowers speed, and then speed overpowers magic. So in this case, we see Invi's medals are always magic attributed, and Ased is always power attributed. And in this fight, it adheres to that rock, paper, scissor meta because magic is strongest against power, and she absolutely can hold her own against Ased. And there'll be more about that in
It's
Ased's.
super effective.
Yeah, it's really good. It's so good. But yeah, so let's see. What do we want to cover next?
Let me see if I have other notes about this scene. After Ased says that they have to defy the master's teachings, Invi, in shock, yells, you are saying he was wrong, which is again my favorite line in the entire movie.
She delivers it really
And
well too.
yes, absolutely. I was like, oh no, poor baby, I love
Aw.
you. And as this is going, again, that was probably the moment in which I was like, okay, I'm going to join her reunion. And as this is all of this is going on, Gula is observing them from the shadows. And then the other, Charity leads Ava there on the, the site where they are kicking each other's asses. And there is another thing that I wanted to point out here. Since I said before that Invi is the only other character beside the Master that says, "May your heart be your guiding key." Before the scene ends, so once Gula has arrived, once Ava has arrived, and Invi is like, guys, I think I found who the traitor is. And of course, at this point, she's accusing Ased. Even if at the beginning she was trying to reason with him, so we're like, calm down, come to your senses. But now she's like, okay, I have, to put him down.
Yeah.
Like a dog. That's
She's
basically
convinced.
what she's saying. Yeah, and this is like a really good, cool moment, because when all the others turned against him, so Invi, Gula, and Ava are going all together to attack Ased. Ased just goes, may my heart be my guiding key. In this moment, he says this, which I think is super badass, because he's like, no, I'm, my heart is in the right place. Like, I still believe in the teachings. I just think it's not what we should do, just following them blindly.
Yeah. And what
Which
is also
cool.
interesting is when the mom says it to Invi, at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah.
He kind of explains, that's something I always say. Like, this
Yeah.
is the first time he's using it, because if he had used it before a lot in front of the others, he wouldn't have to explain it. Like, she uses it to give Ira like confidence to move forward with what he thinks needs to be done. But like now, like if we could have seen like their reaction to that, like they probably, if any of them had any amount of reason and weren't all caught up in a fight, they probably all would have realized, oh, the Master has also said this to Ased. Maybe he also has a role, like, maybe we're not maybe we're not the chosen ones. There's another chosen one. We should probably talk
Yeah.
about all of this.
Yeah, this is what we were saying in the other episode. Like, we don't really know if they know that the roles exist, except for him. It's really confusing. But again, I just thought, was a nice detail, the fact that they, remarked that, Ased is a good boy, basically,
Yeah,
with
it's
this.
pure-hearted.
And the whole may your heart be your guiding key is kind of a, I don't know how to explain it. I mean, it's a catchphrase, but at the same time, I heard people saying it's like, especially how it is used in Kingdom Hearts 3, that comes out of nowhere. Because
Yeah.
of course it was retconned in.
Yeah,
Because
well.
of nobody ever said it, in the other games.
Mm-hmm.
And now we have like Goofy going, Master Yensid always says this.
Yeah, I mean,
Sort of
like
like,
that could be part of the time traveling shenanigans.
Yeah,
but, like,
exactly. That's how they are retconning, probably. But the interesting thing is that in the game, it is something that probably you should not do. Like, the game kind of frames it as something dangerous to do, like allowing your heart to dictate whatever you do without thinking.
Yeah.
Which is something that at the same time, like, Kingdom Hearts has always framed in a positive light, even, since the very first game. I know deep down that Kingdom Hearts is light. Sora just knows that because his heart tells him that that's the truth. But now they are kind of giving this a more sinister angle. Another character that is, it is not a coincidence that it is this character in particular that says this, which is Sigbar/Lucio in DDD. He says
Yup.
that hearts mislead people. Like they are these like curious, dangerous, gorgeous things that can do great things, can allow you to overcome like obstacles, can give you like strength when you don't have it and blah blah blah, but they can also make you fall really, really hard. And again, in just little parentheses, in DDD it is the game in which Sora, the good boy, the hero of the series, actually falls to darkness. So it's interesting in this whole context how they are using this idea of the heart and the line itself. But yeah, I think we should move on from this.
Yeah, good point. Like I said, I want Kingdom Hearts to eventually have a sinister connotation to it.
So,
but I mean, after seeing all the hearts from the Keyblade War travel up to Kingdom Hearts, there's got to be something strange about this whole thing. But anyway, moving on. Now, in the next scene, we don't actually see Invi do this, but we can infer that she reports to Ira again to let him know that all of them got into a giant fight. And Ira goes out to, I guess, damage control the situation. But her doing so kind of makes Ava upset.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, because like in the next scene we actually see her in, she is being scolded by Ava. Why did you report to Ira? And of course, she and Invi have a fight because Invi doesn't have anything to refute. This was a bad idea. She immediately accuses Ava, of course, of making the dandelions. And this is where we learned that they didn't know what each other's roles were. Ava only knows what Invi's role is, probably because Aced brought it up.
Yeah, and she's objecting to the part that is not actually part of the role. So you are supposed to watch, not to tell Ira. So she's right.
Yeah.
Just like Aced was in this fragment.
Yeah. And in this particular case, because she has, well, maybe not entirely Ira's, Invi's fault, but I think you could say that because Invi told Ira and Ira showed up looking for Gula, Invi more or less, or indirectly, spooked Gula into taking this reckless step to summon Kingdom Hearts in order to bring the mom back. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's something that I mean, when I was rewatching the movie, I wasn't paying that much attention to Gula since we are not, discussing Gula right now. But so I'm not 100% sure if he conjured that extreme plan after Aced basically beat him up, or if it was because of Ira being looking for him.
I think
it's both.
It might not have. Yeah. You know what? Good point.
But yeah, the fact is that at this point, like the situation has escalated to a point in which even when Invi and Ava kind of clear, the situation. So Ava explains, making this group of Keyblade wielders is my role, and Invi's like, okay, good. They both agree that the situation is at the point of no return, and that they have no other chance but to prevent Gula from doing whatever he's trying to do. And the way in which they do this is by basically forcing all the members in their unions to collect even more lux. This is something that I said in the other episode when I was like, I think this is the moment in which the Keyblade wielders start to turn on each other. And I was right, because Invi actually says it. She says, if we do this, like if we all push our kids to do this, there is a high chance that since, it's going to be so stressful and everybody's going to become suspicious of each other, it's possible that our wielders are going to fall to darkness. But they have no other choice, because the alternative is to allow Gula to gain more lux than the others and to summon Kingdom Hearts, which is something that
Right.
the master forbid, but they also don't really know what he's going to do. Like it's forbidden for
Right.
a reason. We shouldn't mess with that.
Yeah.
And let me see
Yeah.
through my notes if I have something else.
I do have a question on that though. Like, we're presuming that Gula knows how to summon Kingdom Hearts using Lux. Like, I'm not sure that amping up Lux production was going to stop him from doing that either, though.
Yeah, like this is
That
one
makes
of those
sense.
things that just as I always say when it comes to this series, it has been retconned a fuck ton of times. Because like since the first game we saw like 5 different Kingdom Heartses.
Yeah, true.
I just made a
Yeah.
plural for hearts for no reason. I don't know why.
No problem. I mean, how else are you gonna say it? But it's like, the question is like,
And what I was trying to say is that each of them was summoned in a different way. So
yeah,
and there is also the Keyblade, as in the X Blade thing that is
Yeah,
never
true.
mentioned in back cover and in Union Cross. Like
not yet, yeah.
is never mentioned. But from the old games, we knew it was the reason why the Keyblade War happened. So the war happened in order to forge, to obtain this ultimate weapon. And now it doesn't seem to be the case anymore. Because nobody
Well,
even mentions
I mean-
it. And it was... it is something that you can justify by saying that the characters that live in the future, they know a different version of the legend. Because at this point,
Yeah.
the age of fairy tales, it is basically that,
Yeah.
a fairy tale
is fairy tales
for them. So
Yeah.
it makes sense to that, and I kind of like it when you can have in a story like the characters know, they think they know the story, but actually that's not how it went. It's something that I personally
Yeah.
enjoy in lore.
Yeah, and then you realize that there is a secret part of the history that you weren't privy to.
Yeah, but at the same time, I think it was in an interview or in the Ultimania that it was said that the Master of Masters created the Keyblades in the image of the X-Blade. I'm going to call it X-Blade in the separate the two. And so we are like, okay, but where did he, see the X-Blade? And now we know because there was another Keyblade War before this one. But again, this is Union Cross stuff
Yeah.
that was revealed like years after back cover just recently. So now we can say, Gula is trying to summon Kingdom Hearts without using the X-Blade, without forging it, because he probably doesn't even know it exists. And
I guess we're just gonna have to see how this all
yeah,
unfurls.
and from what we are told, it looks like the union that gets more lux somehow can summon Kingdom Hearts. We don't know how, we don't know why, but that's what they are saying.
Yeah, because it looks, by what Invi says, it seems like the balance is more important. So, like, I guess if you outstrip the other group, if you collect more lux than the other group, then that's when something bad happens. But keeping it, like, ramping up production of lux collection so that you have more lux is not bad. It's when the 5 of them are out of balance, I guess.
And these are
I mean, I guess that has
also
to,
like
that has to be it.
this also brings up like a question with that it is never really explained why they are collecting lux and what they are doing with it.
No.
And there is
And actually, we might get.
no, go
Yeah.
on, go on.
I was gonna say, like, the only thing we might learn about it, will be in the DLC coming up, because it's kind of alluded to in one of the trailers. Not said outright,
No.
but
Yeah,
alluded to.
You are talking
So,
about the false light thing, I guess.
the false
Yeah,
light.
which
Yeah.
that one, like, it was my interpretation originally, like when the mom says, do you really want a world that is built upon false light or something like that? I don't remember the exact line.
Sure.
And I immediately thought about the fact that the unions are collecting Lux from these fake worlds or these projections of the world. So it was like, okay,
Yup.
that's the fake light. Like it's data, it's fictional.
Sure.
But then, now I'm more like, now probably he's talking about like the line, the bloodline, like this bloodline of Keyblade wielders. So
I
the
see.
brain, it's potentially, Erakus's ancestor or something like that. But I don't know, like it could be either.
Sure.
But I haven't heard anybody else mention the fake Lux. While everybody,
Yeah, but like, how many of the other theorists we know are also playing the mobile game? That's another interesting
yeah,
question.
that's true too. I don't know, because I mean,
Yeah.
Lux is just this abstract currency in a sense, and that again really doesn't even gameplay wise really doesn't change a lot about like it doesn't make your character stronger. I mean, now it kind of does because they added like some perks when you are high leveled, but before it wasn't the case. So like it's all about the medals. So it's not really that important to be high level and have lots of
Yeah.
Lux.
Yeah. It was just a milestone marker.
Yeah, pretty
really.
much. To get the pretty titles.
Huh.
And so, I mean, we will probably we will do some more research about this when we get to Gula's case. But yeah, it's convoluted, and it's not explained. So, I'm skimming to my notes.
I think that's all I have on Invi. The last thing we see from her is her urging Ava to help keep the balance by keeping up with the rest of
So
them.
I actually
as far as
have
Lux
a
collection
note
goes.
here that may
Oh.
explain the whole Lux thing, or at least why Invi thinks that it will, like, ramping up the Lux collecting thing will probably lead their kids, their key kids, to darkness. It is that Invi points out that this is not how things should be, the fact that they are ramping it up, because even if Lux had to be collected, it had to be kept separate. All unions were supposed to work towards the same end goal, which was keeping the balance. While what's happening now is that everyone has a different reason to collect Lux for. So basically, Gula is doing it to summon Kingdom Hearts. Ased is doing it because he wants to be king of the world, basically. The others are doing it because they want to stop Gula. So that's what I think. At least that's how I interpreted it while I was, listening to it, because I also write down Invi worries that this will put Keyblade wielders at odds with each other, and that this will lead to ... She hesitates. The Keyblade War described in the book. So she's also the character that actually mentions the Keyblade War in for the first time in the entire thing. And then what you were saying, happens. So Ava is like, I'm going to do the same, blah, blah, blah. And that's the last time that we see Invi, right?
I mean, to my knowledge, I actually don't remember what happens in Union Frost, so I don't know if any of the scenes in back cover are expanded on.
I mean,
in the mobile
we do
game.
see Invi. I mean, since I am in Anguis, you get to see her again as when Ava actually, takes her form, or if you are in a different union, she will become Iras. When Ava tests the protagonist. So I mean, for me, there was that scene too.
Yeah.
But of course, it works for all the foretellers and all the unions. And I don't think that she has any solo scenes, like in which she's just by herself or with the master, like Ava has later on in the game. I only remember more scenes with Ased and Ira, those with Ava and Luciu.
Yeah.
And Gula has some extras because of the page when he talks with the character, with the player character and Skald. But Invi doesn't really come back until the Keyblade War.
Yeah, not until... Well, also not until Kingdom Hearts
yeah.
3. But I don't think she says anything there either, does she?
I mean, she does ask a few questions to Luciu, but it's not like anything. I mean, Aced asks the same questions in a more convincing manner.
Yeah, good old
Yeah,
Sid.
the only thing that...
He'll get the story going if nobody else
Yeah,
will.
like, when the epilogue played out, I was like, Aced, please ask the right question. And he was asking the right question. I was like, I'm so
Nice.
happy. I said, thank you. And one thing that we can say about like her interactions with the others and Luciu in that cutscene is that she's the one that is kinda again worried about Luciu a little bit. Like she's like, it is really you, while the others don't give a shit.
All right.
And again, this kind of brings back to the fact that she probably looks up to Luciu, not the same way she looks up to the master, of course, but it feels like maybe in the future, like now that Ira isn't the first choice anymore, maybe she could become like Luciu's right hand or something, and
Right.
but we don't really know.
That's an interesting thought.
That's just an idea. We don't really know what's going to
Yeah.
happen.
I mean, by Invi's own narration, like, first it's the Master of Masters, then it's probably Luciu. Ira is like third choice.
That's how it feels to me, which is kind of sad for for Ira.
For Ira.
the third wheel.
Ouch. Hey, that's a ship.
Yeah, that's a nice ship.
We'll bring that up later.
in
That'll be fun.
the ship episode, because we are going to do that just for you guys to know.
Just so you can hear us be fangirls even to an nth degree than what we're doing here. But yeah, that's all I have on Invi.
Yeah, me too. Let me just take a look at my notes for one last time. Yeah, I said we are good.
Okay. Well, then that's it for Case by Case, a case of Invi. I've been your host, Kou Kagero, and the box,
In here?
my absolute esteemed partner in crime.
That stays up
And-
till 2:33 a.m. to record this for you guys, because I really, really love Bad Cover and I love you.
Thank you so much. We'll see you again in the next episode.
Bye bye.
Bye.